All right, we are up. All right, we're going to go ahead and jump right in. If you are here live for episode 4 of the Creative Scholar podcast, I'd like to give you a very warm welcome. I am your host, Dr. Dannetta, and I'm excited that you decided to join me here at the intersection of theology, psychology, and creativity to talk about some things this evening. And I'm especially grateful tonight that I am able to go live to give this podcast to you guys to record and to show up for my creative scholar community because I wasn't sure on yesterday whether or not I'd be able to. As many of you know, here on the East Coast, we are experiencing Tropical Storm Debbie. And about 24 hours ago, I think I had no lights. My lights went out, but it was only for maybe like an hour or so. And thankfully, my electricity was restored. It wasn't even out long enough for me to be inconvenienced at all. And so I can't complain one bit, but I knew that there was a chance that I wouldn't have power or Wi-Fi on today, which is Tuesday, August the 6th. And, Tuesday is normally the day where I put out a new podcast. And so I'm thankful that not only am I able to keep my schedule and be consistent with sharing this podcast with you, my community, but that I have the capability on tonight. So I'm very thankful for that. Prayers go out to all those who have been affected by Tropical Storm Debbie. I haven't seen any news reports or any numbers in the past couple of hours, but earlier today, when I checked, I saw that there had been 5 casualties within Georgia and Florida. I don't believe there had been any in South Carolina that I had seen, but there have been a few casualties due to Tropical Storm Debbie, and so absolutely have my thoughts for those people who have lost loved ones. Like I'm definitely I feel compassion for people who lost loved ones due to the tropical storm. Those of us who live in this region of the country, we know this as hurricane season, and I'm not sure the exact date that hurricane season starts, but I know when it's coming up on the end of summer, going into fall, and the beginning of the school year is when oftentimes we'll start having storms and things of that nature. So, for those of you who are safe and sound, I'm thankful for that. I encourage all of you that are at home, if you are in the pathway of the storm and your area has been affected at all and you're able to stay home, I encourage you to do that. So I hope this next hour or so that we spend will be something that will keep you not only entertained but encouraged while you are sheltering in place during this time of storm. I have been in throughout the day today. Tomorrow I may venture out a little bit. We shall see. Based upon whatever however things are in my area. The area that I live in, as far as I know, the roads are okay. Now, I haven't been out there, but I haven't seen or heard of any blockages that would stop me from going out. I've seen people going in and out. I don't know how far they've gotten. But as far as I know, the situation is under control here. So I'm thankful that I can go ahead and proceed tonight with our podcast. And so welcome again to those of you who our returning viewers of the Creative Scholar Podcast, and a special warm welcome to all of my new viewers tonight. Welcome to the TCS fam. Our community talks about topics that are relevant to and hopefully helpful to those who consider themselves creatives, those who are entrepreneurial, and more specifically, those who identify as people of faith, and even more specifically, Christian creative entrepreneurs, those who hold to that worldview. We have some unique experiences and maybe struggles that aren't necessarily so unique, but we all experience them differently. But we find commonality and common ground in some of the things that we experience as creative entrepreneurs with a Christian worldview. And so our motto here at the Creative Scholar Podcast is that doing our inner work is not just a good idea. It is the right thing to do. We are living in a day and age where thankfully many more people are willing to open up and talk about mental health. There are many more people than there have been in past years that are mental health professionals that are creating platforms, creating resources, and fostering communities around helping people to not only tackle mental health in a way that will be positive, but also to just educate. Oftentimes, education is the key to being able to recognize or acknowledge some of the things that we need to do, or some of the things that we need to address, or even just acknowledge or recognize that are happening within ourselves around mental health. So, one of the reasons why I have a great love for the topic of mental health in psychology for creatives is because I'm a creative. I've been a creative pretty much all of my life, which started out with singing. Singing is my first love as far as being a creative person, and my experiences with loving music and wanting to put out and produce music and working within communities of other creative people. One of the things that nudged me to continue with my education to go into the counseling and coaching field was some of the things that I struggled with and the things that I saw the people around me struggling with. So if you identify as a creative person and you're ready to get some encouragement and be a part of a community of people who are honest and proactive around mental health, this is the place for you. And so I wanted to put that out there. Hold on to the fact that mental health and conversations around mental health, it is not a trend. It is trending right now, but it is always something that has been important, and it is a great thing that we are able to use social media and just new technology such as AI in order to get not only education out there, but to create spaces for us to encourage one another, spaces where we can be honest, and spaces where we can find resources that'll help us to move forward and help us to help others, to help those that are in our families, to help those that are in our creative communities. All right, so I wanted to share that. Hold on to that. It is the right thing to do. It is not just a trendy thing to see about and recognize and acknowledge what is happening with your mental health as a person. And so today we are going to talk about strength. What does strength look like in today's time for a person who is looked at as a leader, a person who would be responsible, a person who would take on the challenge of being a person of integrity, being a person who is considered a pillar in your community, being a person who other people come to when they need counsel, or a person who other people know will be there for them and tell them the truth when the time is, when it's necessary to hear some truth. What does strength look like? We often think about certain people when we say things like, oh, such and such is a really strong person. What does that look like? Especially when we're talking about things like mental health. When we talk about mental health, sometimes what I have come to know from my own personal experience and from many stories of others, young and old, is that oftentimes our pillars are people that we look at as strong, as our people that we look at as the people who are the heavy lifters, people who have strength. Oftentimes, those people have not necessarily had the privilege of being vulnerable. Oftentimes, those people have not always had the freedom within to be weak in front of us. So when we think of strong people, sometimes we don't realize it, but we negate certain characteristics that actually make up the anatomy of a person of strength. So we're going to talk about that tonight. What does strength really look like? If you are a person who is pursuing health, if you are a person who wants to be your best, what does strength look like? But before we dive into what strength looks like to me, from my experience and in my research, I want to tell you where some of where this topic came from. All right, so I did a live earlier. I think it was Saturday. It was definitely Saturday. I did a live where I talked about a quote that has come to my mind a lot lately because I am in a space where I am being pushed to grow. I am being pushed to stretch and to adjust long-standing, I guess some may call them blockages or long-standing things that manifestations of myself, my person, that it's just time for them to change in order for me to expand and to walk uninhibited into these new spaces that God is blessing me to be in. And so this particular quote has come to my mind a lot. And it is a quote by a gentleman named G. Michael Hoff. And I encourage you to look it up because then you can read all of it in great detail. I heard the quote for the first time about 2 years ago. An artist slash theologian slash professor, the ambassador, he said this quote in a live video that he did a couple of years ago. And I was like, oh man, it really resonated with me. And it really got me to thinking about generations past, present, and then future. And here's the quote. The quote is that hard times make strong men. Strong men create easy times. Easy times create weak men. And weak men create hard times. That was the quote that he gave. And at this point, I'm not even sure. I'd have to go back and see exactly which message it was that he was getting ready to share from the Bible. But he gave that quote. And that quote has really resonated with me since that time. But more recently, what brought the quote back up was just thinking about my place in my community, thinking about my place in my family. And when I think about my place in my family, I always think back. I look at my parents. I look back at their parents and what I know about their parents' parents. I remember maybe 2017, 2018, I was in a multicultural counseling class and we were asked to do a genogram. And we were asked to basically ask questions, go to our families and ask questions. Some of us ended up going on what's the name of the website? The site where you can pay like a certain amount of money, or I think there may even be like a free trial where you can get some information on some of your people in your background of maybe the last 100 years or so. And so I remember doing that. I remember getting on the phone and talking to both of my parents, my mom and my dad, and asking questions that I did not know about my grandparents and my great-grandparents and my great-great-grandparents. And through doing that, just some of the small details that I learned about people in my background, some of those small details that I learned made some of the things that I have experienced in my journey, that some that I didn't understand or some that I didn't see the significance of, it made some of the things that I've experienced in my journey mean so much more to me. And it made me feel even more like gratitude that God has allowed me certain rights and privileges just in my experience in life that my grandparents or great grandparents did not have, and how they literally took whatever it was that they were given, and they stood on the foundation of those things, and they did everything that they could do um, for the next generation in some cases. And then I even think about some of the adversities that people in my background, maybe generations before my parents, faced, as well as some of the adversities that my parents faced. I'll share one that's significant to me. I remember my mom sharing with me one of my, relatives, distant family, well, not distant family members, but someone that I didn't get to meet, someone who I'm pretty sure passed. Yeah, someone who passed before I was ever even born. But my mom shared with me how this person in my family wanted to complete school, and how in that particular day and time, her her father wanted her to quit school and come home and help with some different things. And I think she was maybe in high school and she was almost done and she wanted to finish. And she pretty much had to rebel and say, "No, I'm gonna finish school." And how she suffered a lot of hardship. I'll just say it like that. She suffered a lot of hardship for making that stand and wanting to finish her education. Well, a few generations later, when it came time for my mom to go to school, I don't know how much that memory played a role in her steps. It may or may not have. It may or may not have consciously played a role in her steps. But for my mother to be one of the first ones in her family to maybe the first one in her family of her siblings and maybe some of the other people in generations that were before her to complete university. And so, by the time I came along, well, it's a common thing, there was an expectation, within my family, something I wanted to do. I wanted to go to college, but it was the thing to do. And not only, was I able to go to college, my parents promoted and supported me going. I was blessed in undergrad to not have to have student loans and all of those things. Those are things that you kind of take for granted sometimes when you have it there. But then when you hear stories of people just maybe 3 generations before you that had to fight to get a free public education, not fighting against the government or the city or the schools, but their own family member. Because at the time, education for a young woman wasn't necessarily valued everywhere. And so, that's something that I think back on now, and I recognize, in that distant family member that I never met, a certain element of strength. And so that quote, not to go off on a tangent for too long, but that particular quote just made me think of my generations. And in thinking of my generations up until now, I recognize now that one of what we may consider a great divide, one of the great divides between our generations, those of us who are 20s, 30s, 40s, one of the great divides that seems to be very, very prevalent and obvious between, those in the 20s, 30s, 40s compared to those in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond, is that our generations, we are much more adamant about getting support with our mental health. We are a lot more inquisitive about understanding family systems, understanding human behavior. We're much more into psychology than maybe generations past. And then to add that to that, for those of us who identify as Christian, and for those of us who live our lives within a Christian worldview, there are many nuances within those who are Christians, those who are Christ followers, those who believe in the Bible, in the God that is shown in Genesis 1 and 1. There are many nuances within the Christian community, within the body of Christ. But one of the huge nuances between the generations that seems like we're trying to bridge the gap with now is the role of faith and spirituality when it comes to the mind, when it comes to um, having good mental health, when it comes to being able to function within a healthy family system. And one of the great benefits for me with being in school, so for my master's, and I talk about CIU all the time, and I recognize, I really feel like maybe you need to quit recognizing this particular fact, but I think maybe it's something that I know is spoken out of ignorance, and so I continue to address it. Um, you know, People have their different qualms about a woman going to seminary or a woman getting education and so forth and so on. But one of the great things in my experience with doing higher education for me was going to a school that was where there were people from all over the world, literally people from all over the world of different cultures, that were people of faith that were coming to learn about different disciplines. We have people from all over the world coming to, you know, get get a degree in education and, you know, get a teaching certificate. People from all over the world coming to learn how to do business in the marketplace as a believer. People from all over the world. I gained one of the best friends that I have, one of the closest people to me at CIU. I have a couple of friends that I gained from being at CIU. But one of them, my good friend and sister Shyla, is a psychologist from Brazil who came from China to come to CIU. So it was such a multicultural experience, but being around people who had come from different backgrounds, who were Christians, who had so many different experiences within their families of origin, as well as for those who are married with, their spouse's family, having children and bringing children, traveling the world with children, all of those things. When you have people from all over the world like that, and we're talking about family system things, and even though we're all from different cultures, seeing some of the same patterns, especially within those who identify as Christian or those who live a Christian life, you can't help but see, the value in learning more about the human mind and behavior, and how belief and spirituality affect that, as well as how understanding psychology and being able to use some of those techniques, how those things can benefit us as Christians. And so, with that great divide, going back to the great divide between the different generations, oftentimes how we cope with certain things and what we're willing to do to address certain things, sometimes it's a little bit different. And I feel like I don't want to defend, I guess, generations of people that are much older than me, or even just maybe 20 years or so older than me. I don't necessarily want to defend those generations on why they they didn't know what we know, and they didn't have the access or the safe space to do the things that we do, because I know that that's not any excuse, especially for things that people experience that were detrimental to their mental health, because of the generations past not having that access, or even having that desire, or that willingness to deal with things that have to do with mental health, other than maybe brushing those things under the rug, or other than saying, oh, you need to pray, you need to go to church, when sometimes people not only needed to pray and go to church, but they needed help. They needed help from medical professionals, or from those who are professionals in the therapeutic space. So it's kind of like, I don't want to defend a lack of dealing with things around psychology in the mind for Christians, but at the same time, I do want us to recognize, for those of us who maybe are of the younger generation, that generations before us, um, they handled a lot of concrete, hands-on things that set us up, a lot of us, to be in a space where we can have a solid foundation, so that we can deal with some of the mental health things, so that we can support one another when it comes to mental health and counseling and all of those things. And so, just thinking about all of that, and all of those things that impact me as a creative, that is a Christian, and that I see impacting my peers and clients, seeing that, like, strength looks a little bit different sometimes from one generation to the next. And in generations past, strength may have played out by, for example, within my family, um, a family stepping up to take care of each other and to be a blessing to the community, while the leader of the family was off at war. Many of us, our parents and grandparents, I think for people in my age range, it would more than likely be grandparents, and for people who are a little younger than me, maybe great grandparents, were at war. A lot of them were in the military, and some of them went to Vietnam. My grandfather went to Vietnam, and my dad, being the oldest boy of a very large family, there were certain roles that I'm sure he had to step up and play, being the oldest boy. And so, thinking about what strength looked like for them compared to, in this day and time, what strength looks like for us. Many of us, some of us have, experienced peers or spouses or siblings going overseas. So I'm not, at all minimizing the experience that a lot of people are having in today's day and time. But basically, what I'm saying is, in general, our struggles may look a little bit different in this day and time than the struggles looked 20 or 30 years ago. 20 or 30 years ago, when there was a fight for civil rights, it looked one way. In today's day and time, we still have fights happening for the basic human needs and the basic human rights, basic things that humanity should have access to. We are experiencing, many of us, a similar fight, but it's not the same. It's not the exact same fight. 20 or 30 years ago, somebody 20 or 30 years ago, there were certain places you couldn't walk through the front door. You couldn't do certain things because it was literally against the law. Now, in today's time, we might still experience some of those same discriminations, but it looks different. It looks a little bit different. And the main point that I'm making is, strength looks different from one generation to the next. Strength looks different from one person to the next. Strength may look different from one scenario or one situation to the next. But strength is absolutely a characteristic that anyone who would call themselves a creative entrepreneur, a creative or an entrepreneur, or a creative entrepreneur, especially if you are someone who names the name of Christ. In this day and time, Strength is absolutely a characteristic or a trait that is needed. And so it's important for us to think about, talk about, ponder, what does it look like? What does that strength look like? I often hear people say that entrepreneurship is not for the faint. And so if it's not for the faint, that means it has to be for people who are strong or people who possess some measure of strength and what that strength really looks like. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I gave you a whole lot of background, really because I want you to know my mindset, like how am I processing this? How does having a measure of strength, how is that important? Why is it important? And then making sure that we all consider that although we have a whole lot of things in common, we all process and experience things differently. But we can find some commonality in some of the fundamentals. So that's what I want to talk about tonight. All right. So we're going to talk about what strength looks like. All right. And I'm going to give you 5 areas that I feel are indicative of a person of strength. A person of strength. A good friend of mine, Dion Hoff, I went to hear her preach. It may have been her ordination service. I don't even remember. But one of the times that I was able to go and hear her preach, I remember her message being a strong woman or man versus a woman of strength or a man of strength. I think maybe it was like a women's day because it seems like she specifically spoke to women. She talked about the difference between a strong woman and a woman of strength. And before I go through these characteristics, especially if you are a woman, I want you to think of it more so that way. I want you to know that I'm not talking about the stereotypical strong black woman that is practically perfect in every way and makes no mistakes and is never tired and never needs any help and has to overextend herself literally until the day she closes her eyes and goes to glory. That's not what I'm talking about because that's not what we're going to promote here in our community. Although being women of strength means that we do hold all, and probably more than I can even think to name here, of these characteristics of being a person of strength. And I say that because I know that being a strong black woman has a very negative connotation, not just from the outside, but just from within. Oftentimes we feel like we have to be strong. Well, I want to start there then when it comes to the characteristics of a person of strength. Because the main characteristic that I want to start with for a person of strength, is honest. A person of strength is honest. When I think about people that I not only admire, but people who, when they speak, I am impacted by their words in a powerful way. Every last one of those people has a measure of being able to show up honestly. Because when we can show up honestly, we are better able to connect. And so, and even in a public space, sometimes we think that showing up honestly means that we have to tell all of our business and put all of our stuff out there and just be completely vulnerable to a watching world of people we cannot identify or differentiate between who's watching. That's not what I mean. When I say a person of strength is honest, the first person that a person of strength is honest with is themselves. The first person that a person of strength is honest with is themselves. But that honesty is also usually brought about by being able to connect with a measure of truth. A measure of truth will open up our hearts to first and foremost be honest with ourselves. And if we can be honest with ourselves, then we open up a space and we make room to grow. If we're able to be honest with ourselves, we can open up a space within our lives to make room to grow. And it's such a supernatural thing about how when we are honest with ourselves, how that honesty is actually it it resonates. Because sometimes when we are honest with ourselves, even if that honesty is just in journaling, even if that honesty is just in a conversation with God, even if that honesty is with a therapist or a counselor or a trusted friend, or an accountability group, being honest just, it resonates. It gives so much strength. The way we show up in spaces, even when our honesty is about our failures or our weaknesses or our desires or our hopes, our dreams. When we're able to be honest, starting with ourselves, just just the vibe we bring when we walk into a space or when we participate in a conversation, when we are honest with ourselves, there is just a place that you can't, it transcends what we actually can touch and feel and sometimes put our finger on. Sometimes we can't quite put our finger on what it is that gives that effervescence, that gives that ability to really connect within and connect with others. But there's something about being honest that really fuels and fosters that kind of powerful environment. Some of the biggest lies people tell are the lies that are told to themselves. Some of the most debilitating thoughts that some of us have are actually lies, are actually the accuser of the brethren, as the Bible calls him, the enemy speaking lies to us about who we are. But sometimes we fuel that lie, we feed the fire of that lie by not being honest. By not being honest. By not being honest. It's like the enemy can tell you that you're a nobody, you're nothing, you'll never be anything. And what fuels that is oftentimes what we may hold within about ourselves that we've never been able to tell anyone. So if for example, if you walk into you have an air of confidence when you walk into a particular space, and you get the job done to the degree that you can get the job done. But you're not able to talk to God and be honest with God and say, you know, Lord, I need your strength. Or, I didn't feel good today about my performance. Or I really didn't even want to go to that today, but I went anyway. When there is no space to be honest about really what is happening within, it's debilitating. Because, and I heard, oh my gosh, I so wish I remember the gentleman's name. But in my entrepreneurs mentorship group that I am so blessed and privileged to be a part of, there was a gentleman, a guest speaker today, and I don't want to misquote him, but if I'm not mistaken, the way, what did he say? He said, I don't want to misquote him, but basically what he said was, he said, you're as sick as your secrets. That's what he said. He said, you are as sick as your secrets. And I think that very much reiterates that a person of strength is someone that is honest. And the way we're going to integrate the theology portion tonight is that as I go through these, and that was number one, only 1, 2, 3, 4 more. So we won't be on for too much longer. But we're going to go through and I'm going to give you a verse. So for a person of strength that is honest, I want us to turn to John 8 and 32. And I'm so sorry, you guys. I have not been looking at the chat. I don't need you to look at the chat, but here I am. I'm looking at the chat now. Drop down in the comments and let me know where you're coming in from. I'd love to know where you're watching from tonight. So now we're going to, and I try to check back on the chat every couple of minutes. I stop and I'll check the chat after each one. So now we're going to John 8 and 32. All right, we're going to John 8 and 32. And I am using the Bible app tonight instead of my paper Bible because I have several verses and I want to get through them quickly. But when I tell you the paper Bible is where it is. St. John 8 and verse 32. And it reads, so Jesus said to the Jews who had believed him, if you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So starting with knowing the truth about who God is, and when we know the truth about who God is, God will allow us to know ourselves in a real and authentic way based upon who he made us to be. And we're able to be honest, and we're able to cast our cares on him because he cares for us. So a person of strength is a person who is honest with themselves and also a person who's committed to the truth. A person who is committed to the truth, right? So that's our first one. A person of strength is a person who is honest. All right, so that has translated differently from one generation to the next. The song growing up, it said every round goes higher and higher, and talk about our service and our walk with the Lord, and that is very much true in life. If we do it right, from one generation to the next, things are going to increase. Our level of mental health will increase. Our level of spiritual health will increase. Our level of financial stewardship will increase. Every generation may not be rich. Every person may not be a millionaire, but the least we can do is understand how to have financial stewardship and pass that along to the best of our ability from one generation to the next. So honesty and being committed to the truth. Being committed to the truth can even extend, beyond what we know is the truth from the Word of God. But just getting wisdom, getting knowledge about things that matter, and passing that on. Generations past have given us the wisdom and the understanding and the knowledge of stewardship, of getting up every day and being willing to do the work, of taking on a family and providing for that family. For women, of being a woman of character and knowing your worth to a particular degree, that that you're made in the image of God, and that you deserve to be treated with honor and with respect and with kindness and with regard. Some of those things are things that we learned in generations past. Now, in this generation, we're learning a little bit more about what self-respect really looks like. What does self-love really look like? What does it mean to really pour into oneself in a way that we will be filled to overflowing, so that all of the goodness that God has blessed us with will spill out onto those around us. All of those things come with being honest and being a person who is committed to the truth. All right, we're going to move on. A person of strength is humble. A person of strength is humble. And the humility that I'm talking about tonight is going to be the humility that references being submitted to God. Being submitted to God. If we are submitted to God, men and women, then we will be able to be submitted to the appropriate authority, right? So if we're submitted to God, we will know how to consult him and how to consider him before we make decisions. We will know how to consult him and how to consider what he would say in making business deals and partnerships. We will consult him in knowing how to identify or recognize people that we should submit to. For those of us who are single, knowing how to identify people who will submit to God and be willing to submit to one another unto God. We won't get too deep into that, but we'll talk about it in another episode. What does biblical submission look like in a marital relationship? But tonight, I'm just saying in general, a person of strength is a person who is humble enough to say, you know what? What does God say about this? But also humble enough to say, I was wrong about this, or I didn't see this rightly, or I responded to that in a way that was short-sighted, or you know what, I didn't consider this. A humble person, honesty and humility really do go hand in hand, because we have to be willing to be honest in order to be humble. If we are not, willing to be honest with ourselves, then we won't be humble. If we're not willing to say, I need God's guidance, well, we're not going to be humble people. But we are humble. We are people that are submitted to God, and we are people that are willing to be submitted to the appropriate authority, and we will be able to understand and navigate what that looks like in different situations. And so let's look at James 4:7 for a person of strength being a person that is humble. All right, this is James 4 in verse 7, and it reads, "Submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded." All right, so a person who is humble and is submitted to God, well, we're going to be willing to fight the good fight of faith. It doesn't mean that we're going to know it all and we're always going to get everything 100% correct, and no corrections will need to be made. It doesn't mean that. But it does mean that at the end of the day, we're willing to humble ourselves. We're willing to submit to God. We are willing to submit to the appropriate authority. And at the end of the day, if a decision has to be made when it comes to submitting to the appropriate authority, or different business partnerships, different groups, different communities, we'll be able to recognize what is God's will for our lives, right? So a person of strength is a person who is humble. All right, the next one is going to be a person of strength knows what truly matters. A person of strength knows what truly matters. A person of strength is able to prioritize. A person of strength is able to make decisions based upon what truly matters, not only in the moment, but what truly matters in this life, right? A person of strength is someone who knows what truly matters. And the verse I want to go to for this is 1 Timothy 6:6. All right, and it's so these past couple of weeks have been, I've had some different moments throughout the past couple of weeks, but I think what has been a common theme the past couple of weeks is that I believe and I have felt so in alignment with where I need to be and what I need in this season to move in the direction that God has for me. And it's just so interesting because one of the things has been that I will study a topic, or I will be doing my Bible in 1 year reading, and something will stand out to me, and I'll be meditating on it, writing it down. I'll talk to God about something, and sometime within the course of that day, most of the times, and if not that same day, sometime within the course of that week, someone who I am in community with will bring up the exact conversation. Like the exact conversation. One of the things I've just chuckled to myself every time in the entrepreneurship community that I'm a part of. And I talked about the benefit of communities in one of my live videos the other week. But it's like I'm not a part of the decision making process at all about what is going to be spoken about each week. But it's been so funny from week to week that things that are prevalent in my heart and mind, or things that are prominent that God has been sharing with me, that I have notes on, that I've written down, are things that have come up, resources that have been shared, or just encouraging words that are literally uh, I almost don't even want to say confirmations, because they've been things that I didn't need any extra confirmation for, to say that, okay, yeah, this is what God is giving you to focus on, but just more reiteration of like, okay, yeah, not only are you in the right place at the right time, but you are hearing the right word that God wants you to know and to see and to lean into. So it's been really interesting that wellness has been one of the things, as well as just renewing different mindsets that people don't automatically, I guess, even think of when you talk about entrepreneurship. But that I know just from the work that I do and from my experiences as a person, as a creative person who is entrepreneurial, who has also worked in great length with the career development, with aspects of career development. It's just like these things are so foundational, so fundamental. So it's been really encouraging just to be in community with people who are on the same thing. Like, it's just been such an encouraging thing. But anyway, so the third thing was, a person of strength is a person who knows what truly matters. So that's why I went off on that tangent. It's like I'm very much in a place where what truly matters, some of the basic things that truly matter, just really holding on to those things are actually what is fueling me to move forward in ways that I have been stagnant, or had that ways that have been delayed for me for some time, in ways that are in areas that I knew, like, okay, I know I'm supposed to move into this particular area um, of my service and of my work and of my time and my focus, and where I need to funnel my resources. But there has been somewhat of a delay, a pause, but over the past year or so, there has just been so much steam behind me moving forward in certain things. And that steam has come from really seeking God and allowing the Lord to show me, like, in this moment or in this time, what is important? Where should my focus be? Right? So a person of strength is able to identify that. Right? In the verse that I want to go with that is 1 Timothy 6:6. This is one of my favorite passages when it comes to purpose. And I was reminded of it again a couple of weeks ago in church. 1 Timothy 6:6, it says, "But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content." I love this passage because if you continue to read through it, it does talk about the temptations that come with the desire to be rich, and how the desire to have a lot of money can very much be a snare for people, and the desire to be financially to have financial abundance. It goes on to say, even in verse 8, into many but those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. And a person of strength who's going to be a creative entrepreneur, who holds to a Christian worldview, needs to be reminded at all times what really matters, because even in having the focus and the tenacity and the consistency to earn more, to have a prosperity, to have a posterity, to have a legacy, as well as to help the people that you love, and as well as to have more resources to pour into your community, into the kingdom of God, into your own family, within your home or your family of origin, whoever the people are that you want to help, that fuel you getting up every day and continuing on your grind and continuing to try to figure things out and make more money. That those are all honorable motivations for getting more money. But it is so easy to fall into the trap of wanting money so much and so bad and trying so hard to make it and to get it, that all kinds of things, it's just easy to fall into the wrong thing if the focus and the character and the integrity and the knowing what really matters is not there. Knowing what truly matters and being able to prioritize is absolutely a quality of a person of strength. And that reiterates what I was saying at the beginning, when I kind of went down the rabbit trail of differentiating the generations when it comes to what was actually important, what was the focus, what were the priorities, and even some of the differences between men, the way men and women process what is important, even though ultimately it all matters when it comes to the health of a family. But sometimes the way men and women process things are different. And some people would say that's why there are gender roles. Others will say, no, that's why people need to be humble and be willing to submit to God, because different family dynamics will call for different things. Sort it out how you need to sort it out. But the reality is, a lot of things need to get done within a family unit, within a community, within a ministry, within a business. And God gives all of us different gifts. He gives all of us different temperaments. He gives all of us different motivators. And so all of those things considering, we all have to be able to figure out how to put those things to work so that we can work well together and create whatever it is that God has put in our hands to create. And to generate whatever it is God has put in our hands to generate. So knowing what is important is a huge thing. And I believe that being able to keep a focus on what is important starts with being grateful for the basic things that God has blessed us with, and then going from there, because that will keep us grounded and connected to who the real source really is, and why God even allows some of us to be able to attain wealth, to be able to um, be creative with ideas, to be able to have the resources or the time. And sometimes it's not even having the resources and the time, is that you have the ability to, you may not have a lot of resources, but you may just be very resourceful. You might sit neck and neck with someone who has 10 times the amount of money that you have. But because of the ability that God has given you, you are able to be resourceful with the little bit that you have, and you can make something out of nothing, literally. Even with that ability, being able to connect with what is actually important, what is important to prioritize in that moment, in that season, but what ultimately is important to prioritize. Knowing that is a characteristic of a person of strength. All right, we'll move on. A person of strength is diligent and consistent. And this is one that some of us more than others have to work on, but something that we all have to work at, in that the more we get a handle on what that looks like in a healthy way to be diligent and consistent, but at the same time, try your very best not to burn out, not to forsake rest, not to forsake some semblance of a Sabbath, to know what it means to be diligent and consistent is a characteristic of a person of strength. So let's look at Proverbs 10:4 for that. This was one of many verses. It was kind of hard to pick which one, but this was a good one. Proverbs 10:4 says, "A slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich." Verse 5 says, "He who gathers in summer is a prudent son, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who brings shame." Right? So being diligent and being consistent is a characteristic of a person of strength. And knowing what to be diligent and consistent at. And that's one of the things that I think sometimes can be a little bit of a divide between the generations. Because we don't always maybe agree on what is necessarily important in this day and time when it comes to being diligent and consistent. I know one of the things right now, and it's so I'm literally right there at that precipice between the two millennials and what is the one before millennials? Whichever one was it Generation X? Whichever one is before millennials. Like I'm right there. I think millennials starts in 81. So I said my age at the first podcast. So do the math. I was born in 80. So I'm literally right there. And that's why I feel like I am so both of them. Like I get it. And I think that's why I love to see, kind of all of those things worked out together, or for us to recognize how Generation X and the millennials and is it Gen Z? How if everyone actually could honor and recognize the need for what each generation has brought to this very moment, I just feel like there's so much we could actually do. I don't think it should be one-sided. I don't feel like just the generation that just the younger people should just recognize the hard work of the older people and know that they've been alive longer, so we should do exactly what they think, because I know that that's not real, that's not true wisdom, because the true wisdom is that a foundation was built for what we are experiencing now. And there are a lot of elements of hard work and diligence and consistency and showing up and finding a good job and taking care of our families that the generations that are, I'd say maybe 55 and up, have established, and that we have seen them walk through things and be diligent to still be consistent, figure out a way, find a good job, start a business, serve your community, show up to church every Sunday. Those are good characteristics of consistency and just having some kind of a routine that you can get established and build a foundation in life off of. But I also recognize some of the things that are in this day and time that we need to be able to be innovative and think differently and do differently in some aspects. And even the element of addressing mental health, even the element of knowing that you don't have to burn out and be codependent. I feel like a lot of the people of this younger generation, those who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, I think oftentimes one of the negative things that we pull from our generation's past is codependency. We try our very hardest to earn certain approvals that the older generation they didn't necessarily grow up with that, and then they're not looking to give that to us. So sometimes we have to dig within and do our do our work. Go to counseling, be in community, um, go to another state, another city, another town, or get online and get to know people who have a similar experience in order to grow. So I said all of that to say that I feel like it's really important for us to all recognize that there are some very similar characteristics that just look the same. We know diligence and consistency when we see it, but I think we have to be able to really recognize, what does consistency look like for me? What do I need to do in my life to be functional and healthy and godly and joyful? What do I need to do to be consistent that is conducive for the life that God has called me to in this day and time? Right? I also feel like we don't need to, as a younger generation, expect an older generation to do everything that we are learning to do now. Maybe some things would be helpful, but some things it's like, you know, almost kind of to each his own, I guess. I think it's very important for us to recognize, like, some of it is not even generational. Some of it is just lifestyle, personality, all of the things. I think we need to be able to recognize, like, what do I need to be diligent and consistent at, and what does that look like for me? What is important for me? Because when we can grasp that individually, we won't be looking for the approval or the go ahead or the head nod of anybody, be it people that are older than us that we respect and regard, or be it our peers. Once we are able to identify what we're supposed to be doing, we can pick up on, where do I need help being consistent? Where do I need to be more diligent? All right, so let's look at the next one. The next one is, or did I hit them all? I think I hit them all. I gave you 4, right? That was it. So I knocked those out. So a person of strength, in my humble opinion, and from my research and my experiences in life, some of the characteristics that I recognize in a person of strength: a person who um, shows up in this life as a person who is here to make things better in one way or another, is a person who is honest and humble, a person who is submitted to God, a person who knows what truly matters, is able to prioritize, and a person who is diligent and consistent. Those 4, between those 4, it's gonna pretty much be an umbrella. It's gonna cover everything else that a person of integrity needs in this life to show up as a person of strength. All right, so I think it's important for us to know that strength looks different for all of us in the details, from one generation to the next, from one person to the next, from one lifestyle or personality to the next. But in the substance and true character, strength looks about the same from one person to the next. You know it when you see it, because fundamentally it's the same. It looks different in the details, but fundamentally it's the same. So my question to you tonight, as I prepare to close this session, is, are you a person of strength? Do you aspire to be a person of strength? If you are a person of strength, please know that you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to hit all of these 100%. You are living a life as a person of strength where you continue to grow, and where you need people, where you need a community of people that will encourage you to continue to push, to continue to be stretched. I don't know a person of strength who is not working on something. I don't know a person of strength who does not have a desire to continue to grow and to continue to change and see more results at whatever it is that God has put their hands to do. Right? So if you're a person of strength, I want to commend you tonight for continuing to show up in your communities, for continuing to show up in your families, for continuing to show up on your jobs, and knowing that oftentimes being a person of strength is a job where you're not gonna get a lot of credit because a lot of times the other people of strength are too busy trying to survive within themselves, and the people who are not people of strength are busy creating problems that oftentimes you may be tasked to come and help to clean up. And so oftentimes people of strength um, feel unseen. Oftentimes people of strength feel misunderstood. Oftentimes people of strength ultimately feel disregarded, but they keep on doing the right thing. And so tonight I want to acknowledge you as a person of strength, that you are seen and that you do matter. Had you not been the person of strength that you are, you may not realize it, but a whole lot of what happens around you may necessarily fall apart. It doesn't mean that you have to be there all the time. There could be other people that will step up to the plate. In fact, sometimes when you take a step back, sometimes people step up because they realize how much of a void there is that needs to be filled. They realize how much it is that you do and how much you being a person of strength adds to and impacts their life. So, people of strength, thank you for being who you are to your community, because when you show up, we already know everything's going to be all right. I'm very thankful because I just look back and I said this years ago at a conference that I hosted. It was called the Making Dreams Reality Conference. I think it's been maybe 10 years this year since I hosted that conference. But I remember saying at that conference, and it just came back to my mind, that one of the things that has pushed me in times where I just felt like, man, I'm not doing this. It's just, I ain't doing this. One of the things that has pushed me to know that God was doing something even when I could not see the results is literally the people that He has blessed me to know and to be around, to be raised among, to be born into. Like, I come from a family on, and I say all three sides. I almost said both sides, but it's really three sides. But that's a story for another day. And the three sides are within my family of origin. But I come from a family of people of strength. So it's kind of like I don't feel like I had a choice but to become a person of strength and to be a person who's willing to look at myself and know that I need to grow, and at the same time learn to continue to walk and share and contribute what I can, even while I am on my journey. To recognize that we are all on a journey, from neighbors growing up to people that I met in college, people that I've met on every job I have worked on. I just feel like somehow or another, God has allowed me to walk alongside or just be in view of some of the best people you will ever find. And with that gift and that resource, I feel responsible. I feel like I should do the best that I can with all that I have been given. And so I want to encourage you, if you're someone who's watching this and you know that you have not been operating as a person of strength, maybe you feel like, you didn't come from that. You might feel like, well, no one else in your family is really fighting the good fight. No one else in your family you might feel like Why me? Well, I want to say if you're watching this tonight, that's why you. I want to say that if you didn't come from a legacy that you know of, from the generations that you are aware of, if you did not come from a legacy of um, people who show up in this world as a person of strength, then that just means it was supposed to start with you. That just means you get a chance to build the foundation up. Maybe that was destroyed by trauma, destroyed by poverty, destroyed by discrimination. If you are a person who if you are a person of color, if you are a person of African descent and you live in these United States, well, we already know for the most part, unless you are don't consider yourself an African American, unless your ancestors did not come here on a boat and did not experience slavery. I'm not talking to you per se, if that is you. But if you are an African American person and you are living in this country and you're doing what it is that you do, even if you don't know all of your generations, we can just already tell you that you came from trauma. And so, if nothing else, you may not. I'm not excusing anything that the people in your past generations did or did not do for you. I'm not excusing that. I'm not giving them an out. I'm just stating the facts. And the fact is, if that is the descent from which you came, you may have come from trauma. You may not have seen anyone in your family overcome, but you can. You can overcome, and you can be the person who shows up for your generations as the person of strength. You will have to do your work. It may be some very hard work. It may be the most difficult fight you ever fight in your life, but it will be worth it. I've mentioned mental health a lot in this episode, and I probably will in just about everyone. It is the intersection of theology and psychology and creativity. So I'm always an advocate for getting support through counseling and therapy. I'm always going to also be very much an advocate of having a relationship with Christ and getting to know God through His Word. Like, yeah, getting to know who God is, the reason why you're here, all of the things that will help to build up the foundation of yourself as a person, as a human being. But even beyond just the counseling and the therapy, I also very much encourage finding a good community to be a part of. You might find that community within your church. You might find that community through some type of group counseling or group coaching. If you are an entrepreneur and that's why you watch this, I have a few great recommendations for a community of people who are interested in some of the things that you're interested in, that are also interested in you being a healthy person and in helping you to find resources that will help you to build up the foundation of your life. So even if you don't consider yourself a person of strength today, I believe you watch this tonight or whenever it is that you will see the replay of this, to let you know that not only can you be the person of strength for your generations, or a person of strength for your generations. Not only can you be, but you should be. You should be. You should be, and you can be. So I encourage you to reach out and get whatever help you need. All right, and I'm going to wrap up tonight's episode with Ephesians 5, starting with verse 15. Ephesians 5, starting with verse 15. Because this is a relevant verse for all of us, believers, non-believers alike, as well as those of you who, like myself, recognize that you are a person of strength, and for those of you who know you haven't been operating and walking like you should have been or like you should be, but you know that you should be, and you know that you're being drawn, you are being called to be. This is for you too. This is for all of us. All of this is for all of us. Ephesians 5, verse 15. And it says, look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. And do not get drunk with wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit, addressing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody to the Lord with your heart, giving thanks always and for everything to God the Father in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. So I wanted to close with that verse because it's such a verse that echoes living an intentional life. It is such a verse that echoes not living life in a haphazard way, as if the decisions that you make it doesn't matter. And a lot of people, just because of disappointment or hardship or different challenges, you really could be in a space, and maybe all of us have been in spaces where we just felt like, you know what, it doesn't really matter what I do. This life is just gonna life. Sometimes you can be in a place like that. But I love Ephesians 5 because I actually didn't read the verse before it, which verse 14 says, awake, O sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. You really can be walking around numb and just kind of numbed out, kind of not really 100% there when it comes to what is God's will. What is God's will? Does God really care? Is God really even real? Is God really even there? Life can get you to that place. Different things can get you to that place. But my encouragement tonight is to say that God does care, and it is His will for you to know Him, and it is His will for you to understand and fully grasp what His will is for your life. So that is my prayer for each person who will watch this, whether you are on here live tonight. Thank you for those who have tuned in live, or whether you are someone who will catch the replay. My prayer for all of us is that we will know and firmly grasp what the will of the Lord is for our lives in this day, in this time, and in this season, and that we will be able to lay hold of everything that God has for us, all of the resources, all of the support, all of the strength that we need to show up in the spaces that God has orchestrated for us to be in. All right, that's my prayer for all of us tonight. I thank you so much for joining me for this hour or so for this week's episode of the Creative Scholar podcast. I hope that it has been a blessing to you. I will leave in the description, as I have been every week, resources, contacts for me, where you can find me on social media, as well as if you are someone who is looking for personal development coaching or some forms of counseling in pastoral care, pastoral counseling. If you're looking for that and you think I could be a fit for you, there is information in the description that will let you know how you can get in contact with me for a consultation, so I can share with you what it is that I do, which doesn't take a lot of time, but more so making a match of what it is that your needs are, what you're looking for in a counselor or a coach, to find out if I'm a good fit for you. And if I am not a good fit for you, or if our schedules do not meet, I have a wealth of resources by which I can refer you. So if you want some help with personal development coaching, with counseling, or things that are relative to mental health, and you want to just do a consultation with me, I'll have information in the description for how you can do that. So we'll wrap there. Thanks so much for watching tonight. Make sure you give this episode a thumbs up. This is a brand new podcast, and I want to get it on the algorithm, get it out there to more people. So I'd appreciate a thumbs up from you. Share this episode with a friend. You can share it on your timeline, or if you know someone that you especially think would be blessed by this particular episode, click the share button, copy that link, and send it on out. Also, if you have not yet subscribed to my channel, I'd love for you to subscribe and to join me here and be a part of my YouTube family, where I not only post the podcast, but I also go live and I post different videos. We talk about different things. I have some lifestyle content as well for those who may be interested in that. So I'd love for you to join me here, and I hope you'll do so. And I am very thankful that I've been able to go live with you all tonight. Thanks again for watching. I very much appreciate your presence, and I'm excited that you decided to come and be a part tonight of the Creative Scholar podcast community. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next week. Have a good night.